From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew Arnold, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosa Bianca. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, I am giving you the day off today, pal. You work really hard. Today, we're going to talk about processes. Not exactly your favorite subject, but
See you later.
But it's what I do all day long. On the podcast today, we have Zach Schaefer, principal of Spark the Discussion, and he is the process expert. So Zach, welcome to the podcast, and tell us, how do you make processes perfect?
Well, first of all, you can't, and I would change that label and say I would apply it to being the conflict process expert, because my area of emphasis is not general process optimization, but human process optimization, looking at the communication and disagreement structures we use to try to achieve goals. And the fact that you said, what's the perfect process, would tell me you have the same mindset that most business owners do, and you're chasing a unicorn with that because it doesn't exist.
But that's part of the challenge of business, right? You always want to achieve that ideal, even though it's not possible. But if we get somewhat close to it, we made the client experience that much better.
100%.
Give us an example. Give us a case study of one of the clients you work with, without naming the names, and walk us through how you kind of do a deep dive into their human relations and how they're better for it, please.
Yeah, no problem. So again, the services we offer, we solve people problems from hire to retire. It's the most fun case studies are around conflict, disagreement, friction. A huge area that we're seeing post-COVID is what I call intentional retention. It's almost like reverse recruiting. You've got an employee that's been with you over a decade, super loyal, you like them personally, they've stopped adding value to the business. It's hard to cut ties with that person. You've kicked it around, and you don't have what I would call an objective process to make a very difficult decision. So I've developed a tool that's got a series of steps, and I can work with your leadership team to really quantify and put some objectivity behind the type of value somebody's adding versus the type of value they're taking away from your business, both in terms of time, emotions, and money.
Zach, as you know, we're in America, and a large percentage of American small business are family small businesses. What happens when that person is your son-in-law, is your cousin, is your nephew?
Yeah, those are the risks that you take by doing business with friends and family, first of all. And so I say you need to be fully aware going in that it might not always work out, and you might have to cut ways with somebody professionally, and then think about that second order consequence. What's that mean for our personal relationship? So in a family business, there's 3 hats those people are wearing: ownership and equity, daily operations and management, family relationship. So when we have that lens, we have to come in and really get crystal clear on those 3 different hats that are being worn. And for me, it always goes back to what's the value being added and helping people navigate those very difficult conversations. If you make the business decision or the management or the equity decision, how does that affect the family decision?
And what happens at the Thanksgiving table?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And you can't assume that, oh, you make this decision that's the best for the business. Well, obviously it's going to hurt the relationship no matter how it goes, but you've just got to go into those types of things with eyes wide open. Now, if we want to preserve the Thanksgiving conversation and make sure family relationships are great, now your business is suffering and you're letting down your other owners or potentially your employees or shareholders.
I love your objectivity. You just kind of encapsulated that in such a nice little shell. But it's difficult for that business owner to be objective when you may have a 3rd, 4th generation type business.
I would say it's almost impossible, to be blunt, outside of having a neutral third party. As soon as you're having even internal HR. So like one of the services we offer is executive facilitation. It's really mediation. getting a neutral third party who's a communication and process expert together so people can discuss very difficult things. Why is that useful? Well, because a lot of times leaders or owners don't want to take certain issues to their internal HR, either because it's beyond their scope and skill or because they want to keep it private and confidential, but they also don't want to start suing each other. So you can't be objective when your money, your family, or the baby you built, your business is on the line. You need somebody else who's not tied to any of that, who has no dogs in the hunt, so to speak. Living in Texas, I picked up all kinds of fun sayings. You got to listen to them. So
now, Zach, a natural continuation of that discussion is succession planning. Can you walk us through some keys, some tools, like anything that you can help small businesses in America walk through succession planning? Because as you know, demographically, it's a huge challenge right now across the board.
Absolutely. And that's another big area where we've been doing lots of business and services. So a different pool or a lane we swim in that pool of human capital is what's called assessments and advisory services. So we offer a variety of assessments, and we use a tool called Predictive Index. So what I'm able to do with that tool is we can get your entire team assessed behaviorally. What that's going to give me is what are key internal drives, what motivates your folks, and then more importantly, what natural behaviors do they bring to your workplace? And then we can couple that with what's called a job target. So you can start to think about what jobs do we have on the org chart already for our current team members? What jobs might we have in a few years when we land some bigger clients? So of course, they'll go through the internal subjective conversations and processes, what I'd call bench analysis, to think about who's our high potentials here, where could we have opportunities for vertical career growth. But then when you can overlay some more of this objective data, personal behavioral data, overlaid on top of job data, it becomes very useful for succession planning.
Now, what happens when after that deep dive analysis, you find that maybe the ideal successor candidate is not in-house and you have to go out-house? No, but please walk us through that transition, right? Because now you have a melding of mentalities, of cultures, and you could have a generational business that's been around for decades, and now you've got the new sheriff in town. So kind of walk us through how you would advise a small business to assimilate those challenges.
I love it. So I always try to paint any kind of conversation. It's always going to be foreground, background. And I always like to start with the background. What's the values? What are you trying to do with the business? Are we in growth phase, disposition? Like I need to get an understanding of what that owner or CEO, who hires me, what are you looking to do with your business? Once I have that information, there's only 3 answers around succession planning. And it's if we don't have the right person in the room, then we look in the building. If they're not in the building, then we look to the street to hire somebody in. So depending on that position, if it's a key strategic role, or if it's a tier 1 employee, we can still use some of those other assessments that we have available to really get a better understanding for fit for that type of position. So these tools can be used in a lot of different ways. Most clients start using them on the fit side. We want to hire for job fit, for team fit, for manager fit. But then on the back side, the succession planning, you can use it for team building for future growth as well.
Dr. Z, we would love your opinion on one topic that comes across our table every day, probably 10 times a day. Once a company achieves a critical level of revenue, right, and a certain type of inventory and revenue, and you guys are rocking and rolling, at what point would you advise a client to bring in general counsel, CFO, a board of directors, versus outsourcing all that? Just hiring a law firm. Look, litigation happens. You need contracts drafted, so you need that help. So walk us through the pros and cons of having someone in-house versus hiring a third party when that company can afford to do so.
Absolutely. For me, it would go to the first analysis I do would be a quantitative analysis. I'd want to look at the trailing 36 months, the previous 3 years. What are your transaction costs in terms of legal, right? So that to me would easily drive the general counsel decision. If you're dropping hundreds of thousands in transaction costs and from hiring attorneys to look over contracts. And these people are always starting from scratch and have no institutional knowledge of your business, what your goals are, where you're going. You're pissing money away, to be quite honest. So that would be a great opportunity on the legal side. But you said legal, you said CFO, or a couple other key positions. To me, the first one, just generally, Lou, would be a CFO prior to a legal counsel, because that person's going to build your strategic financial game plan, of which the legal should be a part of, and usually not the other way around. There's no magic number on that. I guess if I had to put one, if you're spending more than 10% of your gross revenue on outsourced legal fees or outsourced financial strategy, it might be time to start looking internally to bring somebody in.
Now, how do you arrange that corporate pyramid, right? So you've got all the grunt workers. Let's call it a manufacturing company, right? You've got a lot of grunt workers. You got a lot of blue collar. Then you've got all the white collar hot shots in the C-suite. Walk us through how you manage communications among those. I mean, do you try to create that one symbiotic team synergy and that one voice, or is it inevitable to have that dichotomy?
It's an excellent question, and the answer you won't like is the academic attorney answer, and it depends. It truly depends, and what it depends on is the company culture. So we probably have 15 different manufacturing clients. They might as well be different countries, right? How different they operate.
Exactly.
And so certain organizations that we might call more old school, they literally like, hey, it's the office folks and it's the factory folks. It's the folks that work with their brains and the folks that work with their hands. Now, I disagree with them creating that dichotomy, but they also haven't hired me to try to create more of an integrated or synthesized culture. So that's not what I'm doing. However, on the opposite side, I have manufacturing clients in a couple industries that really have embraced the total quality management Japanese approach, to where it is not top-down management, it's bottom-up, that the people on the factory floor are totally empowered to make decisions about changing even the flows of the manufacturing process. So you're asking a question about communication cadence, and I would say what will give you that answer is what's the culture you're trying to drive and create. And I also think you can't just hire an external person like me to come in and Harry Potter abracadabra your culture. That doesn't work. Culture is unique. It's organic. It's internal. You can learn tools and tricks and mechanisms from outside consultants, but the leadership team and the folks at the company are the people who make the culture come to life on a daily basis.
All right, Dr. Z, you're hired. Enough. Great. You're amazing.
We're bringing him in.
Give us the ABCs of Dr. Z. How did you get to this wonderful point?
Oh man, how much time you got, right? I guess the short of it is,
man, we're having a blast.
I was always drawn to communication from a very young age. I could play school well, right? Hey, for whatever reason, I had a good genetics and I could learn quickly. So I'd get my work done, and then I was all about building the relationships in class. I was a bit of a troublemaker. The teachers liked me, but I was a challenge. And so I saw very quickly the idea of arbitrary authority. So I've always kind of thought of authority figures as arbitrary, but I also saw that I could influence them through communication. And so from a very young age, communication, I understood it's an unbelievable tool to get things done in this world. Fast forward 30 years, I was able to get a degree, continue getting paid to go to school, figuring out how I'm going to turn my diploma into dollars. And very early on, I bumped into a professor who was also a consultant, who actually applied the theories and helped businesses solve problems. That was very interesting to me. And so he became my master's advisor and then helped me break into the consulting world. And so I always knew I wasn't an academic per se, but academia was and is wonderful because it gives you a chance to think about big ideas. But I knew I always wanted to put those ideas to work myself. And it gave me time to build my consulting business and help get the sports bars going and some of my real estate stuff. But I was always drawn to human communication. I think it's extremely important, and I think it's one of the most underutilized tools in the workplace.
But Dr. Z, it doesn't stop 9 to 5, right? I imagine when you go home, you apply these same principles, maybe subliminally, to your wife and kid. Walk us through how you manage the domesticity when it comes to human relations.
My wife would say she wishes it was more subliminal. It's much less subliminal and much more overt. Um, you know, I'm in my home office, and if I pull down my background, I've got a whole whiteboard here where I took my wall and I found this amazing white wall board paint that you can turn any board. And then that wasn't enough. So now I've got a mobile whiteboard on wheels that I literally wheel throughout my house because I'm an educator at heart. So we are constantly doing character development with our kids. Our kids are 10 and 6. They have to earn their keep in our house. My daughter's she's won a statewide entrepreneurship scholarship. She's got her own business pulling weeds already. So yes, she would like me to be more subliminal with my teaching, but I'm very overt.
That's awesome. But you are on the podcast, and don't forget, the podcast is called the Liquid Lunch Podcast, not because you're a wonderful consultant or because you're the process expert, but you're here because you own a chain of bars. How'd that happen?
Right. How did that happen? Well, the short of it is I went down to Texas to do my doctoral work and, get the whole professor stuff going. And I came back in August 2010, and I happened to be at a local sports bar that I hadn't heard of called The Post. And I see a buddy of mine from college who is also from my hometown of Belleville, Illinois. He's sweeping, and I'm playing trivia. And actually at the time, if the team's tied in the round, you could nominate someone to chug a beer, and whoever chugged it fastest wins the round. And I was a good beer chugger at the time. So I won the round. And I'm like, why are you sweeping? He's like, this is my bar. We catch up. I tell him what I do. He's like, I want to grow. He brings me on. I do a pro bono project for him. And then he's like, dude, you need to become an owner. So I actually became an investor first. And then I became an owner. So I have a good chunk of equity there. And I'm also the chief culture officer. So I actually practice all of my consulting stuff in our bars.
Matt, you know what I think happened there? He probably took a look at his revenue, and 10% of his revenue was going to drinking. So he just bought the bar.
Right? Did the quantitative analysis. That's right.
So Doc, let me ask you, okay, what do you do in your businesses that you have, and how do you train your clients to hold people accountable? Accountability seems to be a huge issue these days for people that are hiring new people. And at what point do you say, if they're not being accountable, do you let them go?
I love it. It's one of the most important questions we're dealing with, not just currently, but really always. Accountability is simple. It's commitment, honoring our commitments, doing the things we say we're going to do. But accountability becomes problematic, not necessarily at that individual level, which is where you went. What I tend to see as a consultant is usually there's a variety of folks throughout an organization not being accountable. What that tells me is there's a systemic problem of accountability. That's a leadership problem. If you have a large group of people who are behaving a certain way the majority of the time, that is not an individual behavioral problem. That is a leadership system problem. So for me, I would always start there with the economic buyer and talk through what are our standards? Where are we having accountability problems? Because they're usually like, hey, Matt and Lou, they're not being accountable. Come in and fix them. And I say, I'm willing to fix them, but are you willing to change if you're part of the problem? I always got to get that buy-in because they have to look in the mirror and think, we're either building this system by accident or by design. And I usually want accountability is usually by accident. And I want them to start thinking about helping, not holding people be accountable by design. And there's usually key areas where people aren't accountable. And it's oftentimes around conversations that are uncomfortable. Performance is one of them.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of people recently in our business saying, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm on it. Don't worry. I got this. You don't have to worry about me. Deadline comes and nothing's done. What do you do in that scenario?
Instantly, that's the red flag going, do as I say, not as I do. Accountability fails without the last two steps. And that is, what's the next step? What's the enforcement? It's all about clarity of the consequences. If the goal or the commitment is not achieved, the person with the authority, boss, manager, leader, whatever you're going to call them, they have to have clarity around here's the next steps, and then they have to do it. Because when you allow one person, let alone a bunch of people, to stick around in a business or a family or a church or wherever that aren't accountable, you are instantly killing your high performers' morale. Instantly. High performers hate folks that aren't accountable to what they say they're going to do. So by allowing that, you're really harming your business in two ways. You're harming that person who's trying to get by doing less. And more importantly, you're harming everybody else around them who wants to push the boundaries, but knows that it's sort of impossible with that low standard of accountability.
So, when I first started my career on Wall Street, you were held accountable. If you didn't show up at 7:30, you were sent home that day. If you did that 3 days in a row, you were gone, right?
Yep.
But it was a different time in the country, right?
Yep.
Things we said back then, you can't even say now,
Right.
right?
100%. Yep.
So where is that fine line with this millennial Gen Z audience or new hires that we bring on, right? Where we can actually be a little bit, show them some tough love at the end of the day.
I love it. And again, the best answer is the least pleasing one. Is it's really going to depend not just on the culture, but specifically on the level of sensitivity that is normal to that culture. What I mean, my construction clients, they're able to say and do things very differently than my investment banker clients, than my legal service clients. So I need to understand the backdrop of the industry first to understand what's the general level of sensitivity for how we should phrase things. How direct or blunt can we be with folks? That's number one. Number two, trust. The more trust you have with somebody, the more direct, blunt, abrasive you can be. The less blunt or trust you have, the less you can be. And I think that's a huge difference. Back in the day, Wall Street, growing tech companies, you didn't have to have the trust. You could just say what you wanted. Now it's not tough love. They expect love tough, right? Love them first, give them some praise, but then you can be tough. And it's a change, but it usually works. Build the relationship, give them some amount of respect, some amount of responsibility, and then they'll respond if you kind of crack the whip. But if you do it in the reverse order, you're going to be pushing a ball uphill.
Yeah, we've definitely encountered some issues over the last, I'd say, 18 months with that inside of our business, because I'm just pretty direct when it comes to it. I feel like, here's your list. Here's what you need to do. Get it done. I don't need to baby you. I'm not your daddy, right?
Yep.
Go and get the job done. But it may be on me, and maybe I need to stay on top of people a little bit more.
I think it's both, right? The way that I describe it, it's easy when I have people's behavioral data, right? So if I've got that, I can get real specific with how you can do this. But I always like to explain it. Somebody like you carry a briefcase, it sounds like, right? So when you have employees and you need them to do stuff, you'll probably start by being charming, a good influencer, positive, persuasive. And when that's not working, you'll pull out your briefcase and you'll put all that charm in there and you'll hit somebody in the face with the briefcase and say, get it done, right? What I do is that you got to coach people. Hey, here's how I operate. We don't have a ton of trust yet. We're kind of new. Here's the non-negotiables, things that I expect that you have to get done no matter what. Here's the gray areas where you can make some mistakes, sink or swim, no big deal. I'm going to be here to pull you out of the pool when you need it. But as we build trust and get to know each other, I'm going to be able to be more blunt and direct with you. But kind of in the first few months, treat me more as a friend here. It's all about coaching the person on your communication style so that they can he's not being blunt to be a jerk. He told me that that's where we're going to be. Oh, it's probably because he trusts me now. That's how I do it.
I love it. So, Doc, what's next on the horizon for you? You got the consulting company.
Oh, buddy, I've got so many things going. Well, totally unrelated to any of this, a separate business I'm going to get going. I have a huge interest in personal finance, financial literacy, macroeconomics, just kind of a dorky hobby of mine. I just got back from the Bitcoin Miami conference. I'm a huge Bitcoiner, all kinds of principles behind why I am. And I'm quite knowledgeable about it. So a separate business I'm starting is Bitcoin for small business owners. Bitcoin folks are always focused on traders, on people trying to get rich quick, which is not what it's about, or on giant corporations and how they can build it into their balance sheet. Huge gap on the small business owner and how they can start to learn about and better understand whether Bitcoin could be a useful tool for their business. So I am actually literally the next few weeks going to start having that offering for different coaching and workshops available.
Oh, I love it, especially what's going on with the debt ceiling right now and the obligations that we have in the next. Listen, whoever becomes president, right, is going to have their hands full.
That's right.
With all this debt obligations that we have out there in the world. I don't know. Ron DeSantis came out. He's the Florida governor. I like him. I'll probably vote for him, right? But he did say, good for you. Like he doesn't want a standardized government digital currency.
Yep.
And he's okay with Bitcoin, which is actually
Yeah.
big for somebody to come out and say.
Oh, absolutely. You've got him. He banned CBD, central bank digital currencies in Florida, which is more symbolic and political and smart because technically
Well,
they can still be used. But either way, it's a big deal symbolically. You have another presidential candidate for the Republicans, Vivek Ramaswamy. He came out, was at Bitcoin conference. On the Democratic side, you have Robert Kennedy Jr. was at the Bitcoin conference talking about freedom and principles. So like this notion of private, uncensorable, immutable, honest money, not tied to any single government, it's going to become more important as the US dollar continues to wind down its global reserve status.
I couldn't agree with you more. Right. So when do you plan on launching that business? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be right?
I like to launch things before they're ready, kind of embrace that tech ethos of put it out beta and listen to the market and tweak it as you go. I speak all the time, so I'm not shy about, doing workshops. I'm also not positioning myself like you. Clearly I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not an attorney. I'm really approaching this as your business should think about a Bitcoin strategy, even if that strategy is let's learn about it. We don't want to do anything else with it right now. I think that's really the phase I'm going to hit it. So within 90 days from today, you'll see a separate website. You'll see my different logo. You'll see workshop opportunities. And then I'm really going to hit the local St. Louis businesses that I already work with to try to help educate them on that.
That's awesome. Hey, why don't we take a moment out, Doc, and why don't you tell everybody how they can find you, how they can get in touch with you? I have a feeling a lot of people are going to reach out from this podcast.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm on Twitter at this point, but I'm more of a voyeur. I just like to learn and watch. But my Twitter handle is @SparkSolver. Really, the easiest way is shoot me an email directly, Zach, ZACH, @sparkthediscussion.com. Spark the Discussion is my website, but most people go to my LinkedIn, just linkedin.com/Z Schaefer. You can find me there as well.
Awesome. Doc, we want to be respectful of your time. We appreciate you being here. And I just have one question before we let you go. And I don't know, I'm going to go with something a little bit different here.
Sure.
So there's that old adage that you can't fire somebody on a Monday. You got to wait till a Friday. What's your thoughts on that?
Usually with conventional wisdom like that, there's some truth. My personal thought is that you tend to see that type of strategy in a large organization that's having to do mass terminations, right? So there's a second order consequence that they do have to think about for everybody that's left behind. That tends to be why they do that, so that there's not just mass chaos for everybody that's not being terminated. But if you're not doing mass terminations, I think it's about treating people with dignity and respect. So if you have a relationship with them, no termination conversations ever fun or easy. But to me, it's less about the day of the week and more about the substance of the conversation.
Doc, thanks so much. Everybody, that's a wrap. Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.